Ableton or FL Studio, which one is better? I'm gonna tell you right now, it is Ableton. I've been using both for a while. I've been using FL Studio for 8 years, and I've just started on Ableton in the last year, but I've been kind of following tutorials on it for the last few years. I just personally think that it is better in certain ways, in my opinion, and for me. I think for everyone it's gonna be a little bit different, so let's get right into it. I also wanted to say that if you see that I'm doing something in a different way than you, and you might have an easier way of doing it, then please leave a comment below and let us all know what that is so we can help each other learn and get better with either DAW that you're using. For anyone new here looking to pick a DAW between Ableton and FL Studio, I'm gonna break them down for you into 4 categories today. Number 1 is ease of use between FL Studio and Ableton. Number 2 will be sampling. Number 3 will be automation, and number 4 is organization. So starting with ease of use, I think that FL Studio is a little bit complicated and convoluted for the beginner, just because you have a few elements that you have to work between when trying to work on your music. So for example, you have a mixer, a channel rack, and a playlist, and you can kind of juggle those 3 views. And if you're kind of new to FL Studio, that might be a little bit complicated, especially when you're looking for things. They also added a new sidebar where you can see your playlist clips and things like that. So there's just a lot of information being thrown at you all at once, and finding that information can get a little bit complicated, especially if you're new. Whereas in Ableton, you have your entire playlist clips, everything, your mixer channels, they're all in the same window, and you can access those based on whichever clip that you would like to choose and select. FL Studio has introduced some functions similar to Ableton. For example, you can now click and drag plugins directly into, I guess, channels in the playlist view. It's not really a channel, but you can automatically link your plugin to a channel by dragging it into one of your channels on the left-hand side in playlist view, which is a great feature I think that FL Studio added. I've definitely been using it more. However, I do think that Ableton just keeps things a little bit cleaner and a bit more streamlined for the beginner. So that being said, let's move on to the second point. Number 2 is sampling. In Ableton, it is a little bit easier to sample. In FL Studio, there's a few more steps. It's not that much more difficult. It's not too bad. But in Ableton, basically, you'll create a new channel or an audio track, and then you can record whichever other MIDI or audio track that you have. And right away, once you've done recording, you have a new audio track ready. You can assign plugins to that audio track. You're ready to go. In FL Studio, I like to put an Edison recorder on the channel that I would like to record, and then once I record in Edison, you can click and drag that audio clip into the playlist view within FL Studio. Again, I think that's a little bit more complicated than Ableton. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't, at the end of the day, change how you produce in any way. It just is an extra step in between. Because of that, Ableton does make things a little bit cleaner, more streamlined for you to work with that way in terms of sampling. Number 3 is automation. So without a shadow of doubt, Ableton takes the cake on this one. So automation in Ableton is super simple. You just go into your automation view, you select the plugin that you would like to automate in your channel, and then you actually have a drop-down list of all the parameters that you can adjust for that plugin. Ableton, stacks those automations on the same channel for you. So if you have an automation for volume, you can close that by just selecting a different automation that you've adjusted, and they're all organized and kept for you over top of the same channel or audio clip that you have there, so you never have to worry about losing automation clips. Whereas in FL Studio, if it's a native plugin, super easy to automate. Right click, create automation clip, and then you can click and drag and place that clip anywhere you'd like. However, if it's not a native plugin, if it's a third-party plugin, then you have to select the parameter that you would like to tweak it, and then you go up into the top left-hand corner, you go into tools, select last tweaked, and then you can create an automation clip from there, and then you can click and drag that anywhere in the playlist view that you'd like, which is a little bit more complicated and a couple extra steps, but again, not a massive game changer. Number 4, I wanted to talk about organization. So hands down, Ableton takes the cake on that one, whereas in FL Studio, you're kind of running around all over the place looking for things. So in Ableton, everything is kept for you in the same screen. You can click and open channels and view automations on that channel. Everything's there for you, whereas in FL Studio, they've kind of gone for more of a canvas approach. So basically, you could click and drag things anywhere that you want, but what I find is that on certain projects, project ends up being so large that I end up losing certain clips or audio clips or automation clips, and I have to go find them, or I'll create another one because I thought that I didn't make one, but in reality I did. Whereas in Ableton, it's really easy to go into a project and look at your groups or channels and find everything you need need associated with that channel. But that's definitely a much better way of structuring a DAW for anyone to use, and especially for beginners, it's much easier to keep track of what you're doing. Sometimes I get project fatigue and I've just run out of creative juices to finish that project, so I'll leave it for a couple weeks, and when I come back to it in FL Studio, I don't know my ass from my elbow where I left off. Whereas in Ableton, it's really easy to put the pieces together. I can just kind of open the channels, see what I have, get all my groups, see where they are, and go through it that way and refamiliarize myself with where I've been or what stage I've left off at in that project. In conclusion, both of these DAWs are super powerful. They can both do everything that you want. I think they both just have a slightly different approach to a workflow, and I do think that Ableton has done that better. I think that they're a little bit more organized. I'm not saying that one way versus the other will make you a better producer. I really think it depends on you as a person. For me, for example, I've been using FL for 8 or 9 years, and when I made the move over, everything just feels better, feels more natural. I can find things quicker. I like working in it more, and that's a choice that I made that I really like. But for some, it could be the other way around. Maybe, you know, they like FL Studio better and the way that's laid out, and that allows them to be more creative. So I think there's no wrong choice in terms of which DAW is technically better. I think they're both very strong, but I think for personal preference, you should definitely try both. And that's hard to do because the learning curves on each DAW, especially if you're new, are pretty large, so it's not really too easy to get good at both in a reasonable amount of time. But from my experience, I think if you're just starting out and you'd like to know which DAW would be better for you, I think Ableton and the points that I made with Ableton would definitely get you around that learning curve quicker and have you getting out your ideas a little bit faster. And that's my personal opinion. I'm sure some others might have different opinions on that, but I hope this video helps you make the decision, especially if you're new to production and you're just looking at a DAW to get into. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.